Hi, everybody. It's Mayhem. So, a lot of people, a lot of booktubers are doing a May horror month now. Obviously, every month is horror month around here, so this is nothing new. But I do want to participate and read, some good stuff this month. Apparently, one of the guidelines is shorter horror, under 250 pages. So I'll probably read a couple more things between now and the end of the month. But it's also Stoker Award season. And so my first review is for May is going to be The Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias, which is nominated for Stoker for Best Novel. And it's setting a pretty high bar. I'm interested in what the other contenders have to offer. But this one was just great. I really, really enjoyed this one. So I'm gonna give it, I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5. Although I do have a couple little quibbles with it. I'll get to that. So I reviewed Zero Saints probably maybe a year and a half ago, maybe longer, maybe shorter. I don't know. Since COVID, the years and months and everything, like it's been both the longest and shortest couple of years, like ever lately. But I did review Zero Saints, and I mentioned that I've been following Gabino for quite a few years on social media. I've shared a table of contents with him a couple of times. He seems like a really cool guy. We have a little joke that I'm kind of riding his coattails, but I would love to get to a con sometime and, have a coffee and talk about, writing and the craft of writing, because that's one thing that I really noticed about this was the craft was there. And I'll get to that in a minute. So the basic plot is about this guy named Mario, and he's a guy he's done everything right. He's, he grew up poor. His mother was a junkie. He grew up with the kind of poverty and racism and bullshit that a lot of people in the Southwest United States run into. But he went to college. He went into debt. He got a good job. He got married. He had a nice family. He did everything right. But family tragedy, loses his job, and all of a sudden everything just turns to crap, which I think, most of us can relate to. I certainly can. I'm still one court hearing away from being evicted, and, I've got my job for another month, but after that, who knows? So Mario connects with an ex-coworker, a guy that used to work at the insurance company, this guy named Brian, who's a meth head. So as soon as you say meth head, this guy's a fuck up. Like, you just know. I've never met anybody who is actively addicted who isn't, some kind of complete mess up. And Brian turns him on to various crimes. And Mario's now at a point where he needs the money. He doesn't really have anything to do. So he starts committing crimes. And some pretty harsh stuff. I mean, even for the amount of money he gets, I don't know. I think he should have asked for a raise, but what are you going to do? And this all happens like in the first couple chapters. So one day, Brian comes to Mario and he says, "Yeah, we've got a big plan brewing. It's going to be enough money to set us for a long, long time. Are you in?" And he introduces him to this guy, Juanca, which I believe is short for Juan Carlos. Except Wonka makes me think of Willy Wonka. And even, okay, so I have a hard time saying it, because a lot of what happens okay, actually, let's go back. So Mario's got nothing left to lose at this point, and he knows it's going to be dangerous. Now, we've all seen, Breaking Bad, we've all seen Ozark, we've all seen those movies and those shows, and as soon as the word cartel comes up, you just know these guys are freaking doomed. Like, they're not going to come back from this. And if they do, they're not going to be the same. And Wonka is a bad guy. He is a bad guy. He is the guy that those white ladies in Michigan are afraid of, even though they are completely safe from them. Okay. Oh. So one of the things that does get explored, that's really interesting, in addition to this being basically a heist crime novel, there's a lot of examination of the way that Latinx people are treated in the States, and the way that white supremacy allows people who are even worse, criminals, to get away with the kind of stuff that these people are over here are accused of, whether they're doing it or not. I mean, Mario just happens to fall into this bad lifestyle, but when he was just a normal guy with a normal life, he was still accused of all this kind of crap. And there's a scene where Juanca calls out and it erupts into violence. These like your total Trump humping. What is that show? Duck Hunt? I don't know, those fucking guys with the beards and the these guys. And at the same time, Brian is the white guy in the crew, and he calls out Brian for not doing anything. And as a reader, you want to say, oh yeah, I would do something different. But this is a room full of really bad guys with fucking guns. Of course you're going to keep your mouth shut. I know I would. I mean, as much as I want to be the social justice warrior in a scene like that, no, I'm going to sit back, keep my mouth shut, and try to keep my fucking brains inside my head. But at the same time, I mean, yeah, you do sympathize with, like, what do you do in that situation, right? So after Mario and Brian meet with Juanca, they start to go through. They start to go to different places so that they can prepare for this heist that they're gonna try to pull off. Excuse me, and at each stop, like, you get more and more. There's more and more depraved stuff going on, and I mean, you really lose. You just lose all of your hope for humanity after a while. I mean, these are just people there is nobody innocent in this, except for a couple of very minor characters who drive the plot forward a little bit, but they're the only innocents, and the most horrific things happen because they're innocent. It's these are people that you are along with the ride for, but they're not people that you would ever want to meet in a dark alley. I mean, this is some scary stuff. Like, so as the guys go through the road trip, through the preparation, through gathering things that they need for their heist, I really got the feeling, and I'm not, how do I explain this? I'm not well versed in like Dante's Inferno or anything like that, but it really does have a feel of this descent into hell, and each stop is one of the levels of hell, and it's getting worse and worse. So again, that really does add to the feeling that these guys are just doomed. So I felt that the ending was a bit abrupt. That's kind of my only quibble with it, but it is a heck of a ride. Like, there's great gore. The Gabino, I read at someplace a comment that he said he sort of created this weird religion, and it's a religion based in demonic bloodshed awfulness, but in a weird sort of way it does protect its practitioners. I mean, if there is a hell, I'm sure there's much worse coming for them, but they don't really seem to care because they're just there to get through their business now. But yeah, I mean, if I knew more about Dante or about stories like that sort of Dante's Inferno or like Paradise Lost or that sort of thing, where there's this idea of this descent into hell, and then maybe the redemption arc. I don't know. Maybe we can have a maybe we can have a sequel where like Mario does a redemption arc and he finds his way out of hell, right? So most of the time when I do a review, like we talk about plot, we talk about character, we talk about how we responded to it. But one thing that we don't really talk about is the craft. And this is a book that really does wear its craft on its sleeve. And that's one of the reasons I enjoyed it so much. So Jack Ketchum, and this is what I was thinking about when I was reading, especially one of the most powerful scenes that sort of ripples throughout the next probably third of the book is El Miligrito. And this was actually the scene where I had to put the book down and tweet Gabino, Jeebus, I got some fucked up friends. Oh, I'm not going to spoil what happens or how it plays out throughout the rest of the book, but it was a very powerful scene. And as soon as I say El Miligrito, anybody who's read it knows what I'm talking about. But I read it, and then I was thinking about it for a long time. And it made me think about this lecture from Jack Ketchum. Whenever somebody says, what are some of the great, like, how to write sort of stories or books, or I always point them toward a lecture given by Jack Ketchum. And you can find it here on YouTube. It's called Writing from the Wound, or in Horror 101's The Way Forward anthology collection of essays about the craft. It's called Making Contact. I don't know why it's got a different title for both. But the meat of it is Jack Ketchum, who, by the way, was another guy who seemed really, really cool. I really regret never having the chance to get to a con and meet him, because by all accounts, he was apparently just a wonderful guy. But he writes, "You've got to reach the bad guys in you. Get them down in your story. Dig into the dark, mean night of your soul. Remember Peter Straub's line in Ghost Story. What's the worst thing you've ever done? What is it? What are you ashamed of? What god-awful things have you fantasized doing but would never do? What's the worst thing you can imagine actually happening to you, to your loved ones? What breaks your heart?" And for me, I think the reason the El Miligrito scene was so powerful was it broke my heart. Even more so than some of the other things that happened. And there was a lot of heartbreaking stuff that happened, but that scene in particular just broke me. But I thought, and that's a really powerful thing for a narrative to do, and for a writer to be able to create that response in their readers. And then the other thing that scene and its eventual payoff did was there's a way of creating suspense. I think it's attributed to Hitchcock. I don't know 100% if it is Hitchcock who said it, but he said that the most suspenseful thing in the world is to come into a room and say, there's a bomb under the table. Right? The suspense doesn't happen because the bomb goes off. The suspense happens because you know it's there, and you don't know what's going to happen with it. You don't know when it's going to go off. You just know it's there. And what the El Miligrito scene did for me was all of the things were, you know what's going to happen, but as it happens, you're like, no way. No, oh. And then when the payoff comes, what they do with it later, it's like, ah. Although I will say, I was a little bit disappointed that was where it ended. I was kind of hoping that Mario would just go back to all of these people and just become some kind of avenging angel and just get rid of every depraved bastard one of them. But that's not what happened. That's why I thought the ending was a bit abrupt. I was like, oh, come on. But of course, in the scenario, yeah, he probably would have had his head blown off before he even walked in the door, right? The other thing that I really appreciated about the way that the book was crafted, going back to the language and so some of the examinations of race and borders was, and Gabino does this in all of his books. Now, I took 3 years of high school Spanish. My Spanish is crap. So I had Google Translate open, even though it's not really that necessary because you can understand what's going on kind of from the context of it. And if it's a little bit more complicated, then usually there is a bit of a translation that happens afterwards. But I also found that it had this effect. First of all, you get a sense of who these characters are and kind of the space that they inhabit. But it also had an effect of being unsettling. And because I don't speak the language, I'm immediately pushed outside of this story, outside of who these people are. Now, granted, this is not a world I would ever want to be part of anyway, because it scares the fuck out of me. But, but it's not forgiving. Like you're just never quite welcome. And that holds up a mirror to the way that the people in the story are treated, probably by, just ordinary working class schmucks like me, right? Even without meaning to. Because we do have a couple of, you have this world of this community of, they're criminals, but they all sort of have a purpose for being there. And then when you put them into what's a more, I wouldn't say normal, but a different context, like outside of a Walmart, these people are almost as bad, right? I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to kind of get my head around what I'm saying here. And okay, there's another thing that it made me think about. When Juan Carlos pistol whips the racist white idiots, I was thinking about there's a really interesting video essay. Actually, let's see if I can find it. It's here on YouTube. You can find it. And okay. It's called Edgelord Movies and the Men Who Love Them. And the YouTuber is FD Signifier, and he's a sociologist. And he explains how, and I've mentioned this before, we have movies like Joker, Falling Down, mediocre white dude, doesn't get what he was promised, and he self-destructs. And he explodes into violence. He takes people with him. And edgelords love these movies because they feel pushed out by other people, whether it's women or people of color or gay people or whoever. They were promised, these mediocre white dudes were promised a place at the table, and they feel pushed out by other people coming up and having success where they don't. Whereas, women, people of color, people from marginalized communities, we're used to the world kicking us. And we kind of always have to have a contingency plan. And he even says, he especially goes into Falling Down, because this is a guy who was part of the military-industrial complex. This was a guy who was promised everything by the fact that he is a mediocre white dude, and he is supposed to be the top, right? And then he calls it Aggrieved Entitlement, the movie, which I'll never, I love Falling Down, it's a great movie, but yeah. And so it's almost like the other side. A book like The Devil Takes You Home looks at the other side of that. The people that he's aggrieved against are the people who, Mario was promised everything too. But he just goes on to the next thing. He's angry, and he wishes that he could have that back. But he's not out there trying to blame everybody else. In fact, a lot of the times he says, yeah, he's the one that screwed up, and then it's like, well, no, that's not entirely what happened there. The world is just a rough place, you know. So I forget where I was going with that. So the book does spend, in addition to this crime story and the layers of this feeling of this person's descent into hell, it does spend some time looking at race and poverty and also how the money from the cartel, it's such a hard place to be morally, and this is what makes it a noir novel. I mean, everybody is pretty gray morally, but cartel money means their kids can have shoes and dental care. So it's a whole lot harder to take a moral high ground, you know, when it means your kids can eat, right? And so it makes you think about a lot of these things, especially in the wake of Trump's campaign of, you know, oh, Mexicans are rapists and blah, 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 all that bullshit. When at the same time, we're looking at a story about these really bad guys doing really bad things, but they're doing it for a purpose. And they're not inhuman. They're people like you and me that just happen to fall into rough circumstances, and this is what they had. This is their out. This is, you know, would you do the same if you were in the same position? A lot of people probably would. Myself, I wouldn't. I couldn't. But I don't know. And it does sort of raise that question of morality, you know, morality versus money, right? So I think that is all I want to say, but I really enjoyed this. Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias. It's about 300 pages, so it's a little bit longer than the Mayhem books. Really well written, some very memorable horror scenes, lots of good gore. Love a book with good gore. Ending was a bit abrupt, but that's my only quibble. Hope you're reading lots of horror. Have a great day.